As it's 6:30, shall we make a start? I normally say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, but this evening I think I only say good evening, sir. But I actually will say good evening, ladies and gentlemen, because this is live streamed to others watching on the YouTube channel. So you're all very welcome, whether you're here in person or watching this on YouTube. Anyway, I'm very grateful to everyone who attends our meetings, and we're particularly grateful for participation, and it's always much appreciated. We're just slightly down on numbers this evening. My name's Charles O'Connor. I am Vice Chairman of the committee, and I'm chairing this evening's proceedings. I'm joined this evening by 4 of my fellow councillors on my right here, and I will ask them each to introduce themselves, if I may. Councillor Areti, first of all.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Aryan Areti of Holland Ward. And no conflict of interest.
Councillor Wala Idris, Brompton and Hants Town Councillor.
Councillor Malcolm Spalding, Earls Court Ward. And Chairman, I'd like to declare an interest. The item S77 at Beach House. That applicant is very well known to me. And it's actually in the street where I live. And also, he did approach my residents association, which I'm vice chairman of, and we did not submit any objections or support, but I feel so closely involved that I will recuse myself with your permission from that item.
Absolutely, thank you, Councillor Spalding.
I am Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar from St. Helens Ward, a member of this committee.
Thank you very much indeed. And we're also joined by some of the council officers this evening. On my left is Lisa Chung, and the presenting officers this evening are Derek Taylor and Katie Hurrell. And good evening to all of you. And we're also joined by our colleagues from governance and the legal team, and thank you very much to you as well. If you've attended one of our meetings before, you'll recognise our procedure, but I will explain it as we go along. I'd like to emphasise at the outset that all the members of the committee have had all the papers, including an addendum report, and we've all read those. Now, Councillor Spalding's already mentioned a declaration. Have any of the rest of you got any declarations while we're on the subject?
There is one item in my ward, but I've just learned about it.
No, that's fine. Thank you. No other declarations of interest or any other declarations? No. Okay, thank you very much. There are the minutes of a previous meeting, which I chaired on the 20th of July. I've already approved those minutes, and I'd be grateful if I could have the committee's agreement to sign those as a true and accurate record. Thank you very much. The committee is here in full, so there are no apologies for absence, and the only other remaining thing to mention is the running order, which is going to be Erdley Crescent first of all, followed by Phil Beach Gardens, Brompton Square, Neville Street, Fowler's Terrace, Sheldrake Place, Highlever Road, St Mark's Road, Camden Street and Logan Place. So we move first to Erdley Crescent, which is Katie Hurrell, by the looks of things.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The application site is a 3-storey mid-terrace building split into flats. The photographs on the screen show you the existing rear elevation at the property. You can see it already features a closet wing extension which rises up to first floor level. Also of note, you'll see there is an existing window at second floor level on top of the closet wing. Hopefully you can see my cursor there. This window serves the communal staircase for the flats. You may have seen it referred to in some of the objections we've received. Also, just whilst we have these images on the screen, I'll point out the closet wing extension at the immediate neighbour, number 49. You can see it rises 2 stories taller than the existing one at the application site. So on to the proposal before you this evening. The application seeks to extend the height of the existing closet wing by an additional storey at second floor level. You can see the existing on the left-hand side of the screen with the proposed extension shown on the right. You'll note that window that I pointed out on the photograph would, as a result of this development, be reduced in size as shown on the right-hand side of the slide. In terms of the height, I think this section is quite helpful in understanding. You can see in the drawing on the right-hand side the line, the diagonal line there, which depicts the existing sloped brick parapet that you can see in the photograph there. So you'll note that the new closet wing, as shown, would rise to about halfway up this elevation there. The last couple of slides for you just provide you with a little bit more context. So again, this is the rear elevation and then the rear elevation of the neighbouring property on the other side at 53. You'll note that the height of the existing closet wing extension at this property matches that at the application site at present. But then if you look further north, you can see that there are various heights of closet wings further along, some taller, including the one next door but one. And then the very last slide for you just shows you a slightly blurry, but I hope it's still of some use, aerial shot of the rear elevation of the terrace. This is the application site marked here with the red and the existing closet wing. You can see there's that much taller neighbouring one, but you'll see that there is some variety in the heights within the terrace. There's no sort of established rhythm to them. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Now, we have just one objector registered to speak this evening. I assume you are Mr. Jackson, and I understand you're speaking on behalf of, I assume, your father.
Yes, I am.
You have 3 minutes, and I will let you know when your time is up.
Yes, no problem.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, Philip Jackson, current permanent resident at Flat 5 and 51 Oddly Crescent, speaking on behalf of George Jackson. It was a little disappointing to hear that this approval went through to the hearing after all the objections, and particularly that a number not addressing a number of the objections directly to the residents. I think the first of these is one that's been raised by a number of the residents, that the structural implications of these works and what effect that may have. Now, as you can see from the other buildings, it may not. There are a number of buildings that are suitable, but we've had no reassurance or no communication that structural assessments have been taking place and are going to take place as part of the proposal. In addition to that, I think one of the big concerns has been raised by Katie as well, as the reduction in the size of that window from in the manner of sort of 70%. So that window is crucial for both light and ventilation in the communal areas, particularly ventilation in weather conditions as we're seeing today. It's drastically different temperatures from the front of the building, on the street side to the rear. So the reduction of 70% of that window will drastically affect our quality of life in that building, particularly to all of the flats, not just the ones adjacent to it, as it really provides a lot of draft through the building in these conditions. I think in addition to that, I think the fact that it's not been addressed, the additional payment that the residents will incur as part of the lease change with the change in layout of the property, I think that also needs to be addressed as part of the proposal moving forward. So furthermore, I think, well, to summarise, I think the proposal doesn't go far enough to satisfy all the needs of the residents, and not only does it significantly impact our quality of life, there is no, it leaves us permanently worse off moving forward in the other properties. So George and I would both like to firmly object to this and ask the council if they would reconsider the decision to approve this proposal.
Well, thank you very much for those helpful comments. You were well within your time. Now, we have the opportunity for my colleagues and me to ask you questions and just discuss further the points you're making. So, colleagues, Councillor Bakhtiar would like to ask a question.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Jackson. I have already highlighted your questions because I read the objecting letters and I highlighted this structure concerns from your neighbors and residents. And the other issue I have noted is the reduction of the window and the amount of light. I would like to ask officers later on after finishing with you, because normally with this kind of application, there should be a structural engineer's report attached to it, specifically telling the builders how to do, which wall to move, which beam to use, how to do that. I will be surprised if we haven't got this report by now. So,
As a resident, we've received nothing in that manner. And if the councillors and the board know differently, but we've received nothing and no information. So it's a big concern of ours at the moment.
we will ask the officers this. Thank you. Chair.
I think what Councillor Bakhtiar is referring to is once we've finished talking to you, we'll then go on to quiz the officers, if that's right. So we'll take that point up very shortly. Thank you. Councillor Spalding was next, sorry.
Yeah, not for this one, the next one. No, this one I haven't spoken to anybody, but I do know about it because this street is an exact mirror image of my street. And in fact, in my house, my neighbour on the top floor has applied for exactly this and got permission. And so I know exactly what this situation is. Can I refer in my question to Dr. Jackson's 4 points? Councillor Bakhtiar has referred to two of them. I'll just dissect the four one by one very quickly and ask you, are you aware on point one, the structural report is not a thing that planning approves, it's something that building control approves, so it's a different regime. So we could give permission for something, but there may be structural problems that are dealt with under a different system. Secondly, the removal of the big window. The officers will confirm this, and it's in their report, that this actually does cause harm. It does reduce the amount of light and air to the common parts. It doesn't affect the residential parts, and that's something we've got to bear in mind. So are you aware that we would consider light and air and windows? Yeah. The next point is the significant disruption to the neighbours. This often comes up as an objection, but it's not a planning consideration because it's to do with a construction management plan and maybe a transport plan, which would be approved as a condition. And it's also environmental health, which is a different regime. If the builders do cause trouble or build outside the permitted hours, that's a different enforcement. So the final point on the lease, we had this. The lease is a private matter. The freehold company owns that space. And even though we might give permission tonight, the freehold company might refuse to sell that space to the leaseholder, and so it would never be built. So all we're going to look at is the appearance of it and does it cause any harm. And within your house, you might decide as freeholders that you don't want this to happen. And even though we gave permission, it's your property. Do you understand that?
That's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry it was so long.
No, thank you for the explanation, Councillor Spalding, helpful. And Councillor Idris.
Well, he just nicked one of my questions, so I'm done.
All the questions did well.
So, no. You made my point regarding the lease. That was the thing I was going to ask about. Maybe I should ask you, have you been informed by the lease company about anything, any possible change or anything? Or I know that's not a planning thing, but still, just as a resident,
well, my father is one of the directors. George is the director of the freehold, so I've been informed through him the proceedings, I think, with that. But just wanted to raise it here as a concern that we have, just so the council were aware.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Aretti.
Dr. Jackson, just checking, so all the flat owners own the freehold, I believe?
I know of flat 5, which is mine, flat 1, which is Charles, and flat I think it's 6, which I can't remember the name of the woman who owns that one. But apologies, but yes, they're in the freehold.
Right. In terms of the main concerns that you raised, your 4 points, I read that with great interest, by the way. What ticks your top box? Is it the lease, the structural damage,
Yeah, I
the
think
big window?
Yeah, I think the two for me are the structural and the window. So with, obviously, I think we're probably all aware of the Earls Court development and all the works that be going on there. I think that it'd be unwise to proceed without full structural analysis of the area prior to that whole development site being turned over effectively. And on top of that, yes, the window does affect the communal areas, but all of the heat, all of the ventilation, all of the light very much affects me as a resident in my street-facing flat. It's not solely a communal area thing. If you just by opening the door to leave and it's a massive temperature difference, especially in this weather, that it significantly improves my quality of life in the flat at the moment, having such a large area to ventilate out. Especially, I'm unsure of the actual floor plans of the other flats along the street, but obviously this is split into the floor I am on and the flat below as well. It's split into 2 flats, so you have the street side and the rear side. Obviously, it's less of an issue if that flat covers the entire ground of that floor, so you can get ventilation through, and it helps. But I think maybe they're not all like that, but I think it's just worth considering that the window does significantly improve our quality of life in that building.
Thank you. Chairman, if I may, just to follow up. Yeah, thanks. So if the applicant comes to you for a compromise on the window, would you be happy with that, or?
I think it's hard to know without seeing it. I would be interested to see what the compromise would be, because the space that there's then now been put on the proposal seems like the only option for if this works were to go ahead. I'd be interested to see it, definitely, but I don't know what other options we would have to improve that based on the layout of the flat, the building itself, sorry.
Thank you very much, Councillor Retty. Can I just be entirely clear about this window? The window from the large window on the back of the building, that opens currently onto the common parts, does it? Onto the staircase? Is that right?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And so your point about ventilation is that you would leave the door of a flat open or something to let air get through?
Just general ventilation in the building. I think it still helps with a lot of the heat and air through the buildings. Obviously, all the doors probably have small gaps and things like that. It does make a big difference to when I've blocked it off in the past or left it slightly ajar if I've been out. Even though it's a communal area, and obviously that's the main concern with the light. I think there's workarounds with that, but I think for me the ventilation that window gives really improves the quality of life.
Yeah.
And you can see on the drawings here the size difference. It's quite a large difference to what we currently are expecting. I think the point is that although there's other flats that do it, the current residents of the flat are losing out by the changes that are being proposed here.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. That's helpful, because Councillor Spalding's made a good point in that of the points in your father's letter, while we sympathise with all of them, we're pretty limited in how we can deal with 3 of the 4 points. The one that's most germane to planning is number 2 about the big window, and that's why I'm focusing on that, because essentially, as Councillor Spalding explained, we can consider use and appearance effectively in simplified terms, and so this is really the only one dealing with appearance. We'll talk further to officers about it in a second, but thank you very much for your contributions. So, colleagues, Councillor Idris, one further question possibly?
One follow-up question. Would you say the window in its current state is does it have any effect on your well-being? Does it have any effect in the way you feel? Because it seems like a lot of time with planning, we take feelings and emotions and out of the equation, and we focus very much on the bricks and mortar and the fundamentals of planning. I mean, will the size, although it's not, it airs the communal area as opposed to your own flat, is there any feeling, any well-being feeling coming from there? And
I think I'd be lying to you if I said there wasn't. It's quite nice coming home with the sun setting over that development. It's a nice feature but that walk into the building lasts 3 seconds. And I've got Brompton Cemetery, I've got a lot of areas very close to where I live that give me the same feeling. The main thing I have is the temperature in the building, in particular in these months. And summer, as we've experienced over the last today in just the air through there. If you're able to see the temperature difference in that part of the building when that window's open compared to even on the street, which is in the shade, it is a huge difference, which then obviously impacts the rest of the building. My background in engineering, which I currently work in, tells me that changing the size of that aperture so drastically will have a very large effect on that temperature, just by the means of volume of airflow that is allowed to go through.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, at this stage we move on to discuss the points further with Katie Hull, so thank you very much for your time. Colleagues, questions to Katie? Councillor Idris.
Can you put the other image back up, please? So it seems like we split the big window into a small one and an even smaller one. Is that the case? Because I'm trying to find out where is the other window. There is a third window on the top level, a very tiny. Is it a hatch? What is it?
So if you have a look on the left hand of the images on the screen, that's the existing situation, and the window that Mr. Jackson's referring to is this large one here.
Yeah.
So under the proposals, because of the additional height of the closet wing, it takes up the space where the majority of that window is currently located. So you can see in the right-hand image above the new closet wing, this is the replacement window.
Yeah.
And so the height of it starts at the same as in the current position, but you can see it's much, much shallower in its depth. It's probably about a third of the size of the existing window. And that's it. There's just the one window in replacement.
So what's that thing on top of the closet wing? Is that a window? Am I the only one seeing this? Oh, sorry.
I wonder if you're referring to the drawings also show the brick.
Yeah. What is this? Yeah.
The brick course above the window. So that's just the decorative bricks that would be above the window, much like there is at the moment. So if I return to the photograph, you might be better looking in your pack, where hopefully there might be a photograph. You can see there's some existing bricks, which is just a decorative feature. So looking at this photograph, just to give you an idea, the window you can see in the left-hand image, it would be about a third of the size of that.
Okay. So that's not a window, it's bricks. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there is a window. I don't know if you can see my cursor, sorry, it is particularly
you might see it
difficult.
better, sorry, on the other photograph that you showed with the backs of both houses. There's a new photo in the pack. Yeah, there. Can you see?
Thank you, Chairman.
The decorative brickwork there.
Yeah.
That's
So there is a window in the same location as the existing window, but it's about a third of the size. So
that's a window.
It is a window, yes.
So we're not closing the big window, we're just chopping it off, adding I'm trying to understand, adding the closet wing and adding a new window.
Yeah. Essentially, the building up of the closet wing restricts the size of that window because it can no longer be as big as it is. So a window remains, but it's just significantly smaller. But there would still be an openable window in the communal staircase. It is just smaller than the one that Mr. Jackson and the rest of the residents are presently able to benefit from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And may I ask a question? The size of the window is clearly an issue for Mr. Jackson and his father, which I understand, especially when one's thinking about ventilation. If we were minded to approve, because we're somewhat constrained in what we can do here, is there some way of ensuring that the small replacement window is openable so as to achieve ventilation through the building?
Yes, I believe it's intended to, but if we wanted to firm that up through the use of a condition, I think that would be possible, yeah.
Because it strikes me that if it's on a half landing, as I imagine it is, going up a staircase, that if it's reduced significantly in size, it'll suddenly be well above head height. Is that right?
Yeah, and the other point to make there is it goes up a floor. So it's rather than being in the much larger communal space, it then goes up to the next flight of stairs, which is much more constrained as you go to what would be the loft flat, let's say. So it would be a bit higher, definitely, than it is in the current position. And also further away from the general, or the flats as a whole, just maybe only the top flat would actually benefit from it.
I see, yeah. Okay, well it sounds as though it wouldn't be a perfect solution, but it might at least provide some guarantee that one would be able to get air through the building to some extent.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and we can all hugely sympathise with what Mr. Jackson's saying. The fact that it's a communal area, though, I think has to be, quite a fundamental part of our consideration this evening about it. Traditionally, when we're looking at living conditions, it's the conditions within the flats themselves and the habitable rooms in particular. That's not to say that we shouldn't give any weight at all to the communal space and the quality of that space, but just to caution that, that perhaps the weight that you would give to that is less so than if we were looking at a proposal where Mr. Jackson's living room window, for example, was going to be severely compromised.
Yes, I agree with that. And may I just ask you to explain the idea of precedence in planning? It's rather sort of open-ended essay-type question, but I'm always slightly confused myself because I'm always told that there's no such thing as precedent and everything is considered on its own merits. But it seems to me that there's an issue here with certain of the closet wings in the street having gone up, and the fact that there's no uniform pattern of low closet wings, that also somewhat militates in favour of us having to approve this, because otherwise I think we might set ourselves up for or expose ourselves to an appeal.
Yes, you're absolutely right. We would say there is no such thing technically as a precedent, but with each application, the immediate site context is obviously a material consideration and an important factor to take into account. So yes, it's important that we do look at the street as a whole and look at the neighbouring development and the pattern. And I think you're right, this should carry significant weight in the determination of this application. Just whilst we were touching on that, an application for exactly the same development was also approved back in 2017, you'll have seen from the pack, and so I would suggest that also due weight needs to be given to that. That doesn't mean that the conclusion that you come to needs to be exactly that of 2017, but you need to bear in mind whether the context and site characteristics have changed in those few years, and whether the development plan has significantly changed in those few years. And my advice to you is that it hasn't. It's largely, or it is the same as it was back in 2017 when that decision was made.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. I'd forgotten that. So the 2017 application that was approved was for a closet wing extension of exactly the same height as now proposed. Is that right?
That's right, and it included the same size reduced window on the second floor as well.
Which it seems to me needs to be given fairly significant weight. I imagine a planning inspector would be slightly surprised if we'd approved something 3 years ago and then, on a whim, refused to approve it 4 years later.
Yes, as I say, that consistency in decision making is incredibly important, and that's why we have development plan policies to facilitate that. So should there have been a significant change in circumstances, new relevant policies, or various things that might have changed in that time, then of course it would be completely plausible that you might come to a different conclusion. But I think in this instance there's little of any change of any impact on the assessment of this proposal again.
Colleagues, any further questions? Well, I'm going to suggest that we formalise the proposal to have whatever this replacement window is. It says on the plans, new white painted timber-framed window in reduced opening. It doesn't say categorically that it is openable. I think we should somehow include that, either as a condition. Would it be as a condition?
I would suggest the most straightforward way would be to amend recommended condition 5, which requires that window to be timber. We could specify that the second floor window needs to also be openable.
Councillor Spalding.
Yeah, I was going to mention this, that the harm is clearly the second point of objection. There is harm. But condition 5 does say that it shall be a sash window. And I guess there will be 2 fairly small horizontal windows which will be movable on sashes.
I was wondering about that because from the drawing...
Condition 5 says that they should be on a sash.
Yeah, well, you're right, it's a good point. Double hung sliding sashes and so maintained, which seems to conflict somewhat with the drawing, which doesn't look to me as though there's any moving parts at all, which is why I raised it.
Yes, I think you're quite right. I think perhaps that condition is better drafted in relation to the new window in the closet wing, in which case maybe a suggested 6th condition, a completely separate condition to cover that window at the second floor location might be a better way to secure it.
I think I agree with that, and I think we could ask officers to draft a condition after the committee, if we're minded to approve, to deal with that, bearing in mind the points that we've discussed.
Shouldn't the approving be with the condition?
Yes, I'm simply, we will vote on it with the proposed condition, but I'm saying the exact wording doesn't need to be hammered out now. We can leave that to officers to deal with it, as long as they know the spirit of what's intended, i.e. an openable window in the reduced opening. Councillor Oretti.
Just a question to officer. If you look at the space above that window, which is going to be shortened, can they extend the window up a little further up to get more light? No?
I'm afraid I don't know because of the internal layout and whether that would be something achievable. It's not what's being put before us this evening, so I'd caution sort of trying to amend the design in any way, particularly if it's something that we're not confident that they would actually in reality be able to implement.
Thank you very much for that. Well, colleagues, we've heard a very interesting discussion and Mr. Jackson's points, which were all very well made on the subject. I think you've heard from the points I've made that I would find it rather difficult to refuse this application for the reasons I've explained, but it's all up to you individually to make your own mind up on how you choose to vote. Do any of you want to discuss any points in sort of open forum now? Councillor Spalding.
We've all accepted there's harm in loss of light, smaller window, potentially less ventilation. So that's the harm, but the benefits are we have to look at those as well. There's more living space has been created. That's a benefit. It does preserve the conservation area because this is the rear facade and the materials will conform with the existing materials. And the structural issue, actually, we know there are others that have been done, even with 2 stories. So it must be possible to conserve the look of these houses at the back, and it structurally must be possible. So all those benefits have to be weighed up against the reduction of that one window, which is the one harm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's absolutely right and helpful. It probably doesn't console Mr. Jackson very much, but clearly it is possible to do this, and we're just trying to mitigate the ill effects as best we can. So, Councillor Retty, sorry, you want to make a final point, do you?
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to second what Councillor Spalding said, but also very interesting point made by Councillor Spalding earlier, but although the planning permission could be granted, but the freeholder could reject that. So that ultimately, I think there would be a compromise between them, because they can't just get through unless they get the permission from the freeholder. So that's a very interesting point.
Yeah, Councillor Retty and Councillor Spalding are, of course, absolutely right that we are simply saying whether this is acceptable in planning terms, and that doesn't by any means mean that all the private law issues are sorted as between the freeholders and the leaseholders, and any building control issues that may also need to be sorted out as well. We're simply saying whether it is acceptable in order to grant planning permission. So, colleagues, with all those points in mind, and with my suggested additional condition, we come to the recommendation, which is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report, plus new condition 6, and I'll go round one by one to find out how you vote. Councillor Retty.
In favour, Chair, based on the conditions that we proposed.
Councillor
There's a
Idris.
plausible compromise. Thank you.
Condition 6 was going to make sure that it's a window that they can open.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, and in this case, I approve, yeah.
Councillor Spalding. Thank you. And Councillor Bactia.
In favour with the condition.
Yeah, and I'm also in favour of granting with the condition. So planning permission is approved, is granted on that basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So we now move to Phil Beach Gardens, and this is where Councillor Spalding is going to recuse himself. And that's Katie Harrigan.
Thank you very much. I'll start my presentation just with a few photographs of the site so you can all get your bearings. The existing, the slide on the screen at the moment shows you Beach House from an aerial view. You'll note the curve of the row of properties, and it's this building here in the middle. And then this photograph shows you the rear elevation of Beach House itself. And then the 2 photographs on the slide now show you the rear of the site of flat 2, which is the application property. You'll see it currently features a wooden deck, which then backs out into the garden area and then the communal gardens beyond. And then the last couple of photos for you. In this slide, I've just shown with the red arrow on the screen there, the existing boundary treatment with the neighbouring property, which comprises this curved timber fence. I'll come back to that and why it's relevant in a minute. Looking then, and then in plan, again, where the red arrow is, here's that strange curved boundary that's a feature of the property, and then the wooden decking that you can see. So under the proposals, a rear extension would be constructed. It would mirror that curved boundary, so it would feature a curved element on the far side, and then perhaps a more traditional form on the other side of the extension. Probably best understood in the elevational drawing provided, So you can see on the far right-hand side there, there's that curved element. This is proposed to be solid in construction, and then a glazed design for the remainder of the rear extension running the full width of the property. The last two slides are just the computer-generated mock-ups that the applicant has provided, but I thought they were useful just to understand the proposed materials and finish for the extension. So there's that one, and then the final image is a close-up there of the proposal. And that's the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and we have no registered speakers, so colleagues, we move straight to questions to officers. Councillor Bakhtiar.
One of the objectors is stating that in point 4, anybody could climb the rear extension and enter my bedroom. I won't be able to leave my windows open. What's your officer's comment on that?
I mean, you can see the design of the extension there on the screen before you, and that one, I'm not sure how easy it would be to climb. I mean, I suppose it's possible, but as it is with any rear extension within a property, I'd also say, you know, in terms of security, it's a huge property. It backs onto communal gardens. I suspect it wouldn't be a very easy thing to do discreetly. I'd also add that things like the security matters that have been raised, again, don't fall under the planning regime for consideration on something like this.
Councillor Idris.
Have we looked at the effect on the views and the for neighbouring buildings on either side? Will this build? I mean, it looks huge. Will it obstruct their views? Will it, you know? Yeah.
So we have taken into account views both in terms of impact on the living conditions of those above and on either side.
Yeah.
In terms of the bulk of the extension and the height, we're satisfied that given the existing boundary treatment and the fact that the height doesn't go significantly above this white bar that you can see there on the screen, there'd be no impact on living conditions. In terms of the views that residents enjoy, there's no such thing as a right to a view. Of course, how something appears and the appreciation of the character and appearance of a building then does fall under something that we can consider in planning terms. In this instance, you'll see from the report the property itself is considered a neutral contributor to the conservation area, and it's considered that the extension has no impact on that overall contribution.
What kind of, I mean, is there going to be any kind of light pollution, you think, from the extension?
I mean, it does incorporate significantly more glazing than the existing rear elevation. What I would say is that the location of that glazing being further out rearwards means that there's very unlikely to be light spillage directly up into the windows above it. It does feature in plan a roof light, but the majority of that roof is covered by a green roof. So I would say any light spillage or light pollution from it would be comparable really to the existing situation on a building like that where there are so many existing openings. I should also say that those roof lights have been conditioned to be obscure glazed to ensure that there's not direct sight lines up, and that would do something as well to reduce the glare from the windows.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Retty.
Thank you, Chairman. I slightly didn't understand. The use of class is C3A, but is that a housing one or?
Yes, so the whole building is in residential use, and this relates to flat 2, so it's split up into flats. So yes, there's no change of use proposed. This would all be residential accommodation associated with the existing flat at flat 2.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. So, colleagues, unless there are any points that we want to discuss amongst ourselves, we can vote on the proposal. From my perspective, I happen to rather like this application, but that's just a personal point of view, of course. I don't think the host building is anything to write home about, without being too rude about it. I think this is potentially a good addition and creates additional living space, and does so in a well-designed way, but you will no doubt take your own views. This time, I'm actually, rather than laboriously go through one by one, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. So the...
Chairman, sorry to interrupt. If I could just very briefly just mention, unfortunately we missed it as part of the addendum, so I apologise for that, but you'll see in paragraph 6.1 we refer to the need for a condition relating to SUDs, that's sustainable urban drainage systems. Unfortunately that was missed from the recommended condition list. So as you're discussing the recommendation to approve and come into your decision tonight, can I ask that consideration is also given to the addition of that condition as well?
Sorry, where do you say it is meant? Did you say it wasn't in the addendum?
Yes, apologies, we missed it as part of the addendum, so I apologise for that. But
no, that's all right.
It is our standard condition for rear extensions where they are extending out into an open area, where we ask the applicant to bear in mind the drainage implications and would require some SUDs to be incorporated. It may well be that the green roofs that they've already proposed are enough, but we would like confirmation of that through the submission of a condition.
Fine. So what we're voting on is the recommendation that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report, plus a SUDS condition. And could I please see those in favour of the recommendation? 3. Or is your hand up, Councillor Regis? Sorry, or not? Well, we're voting on a show of hands. You're in favour, so, okay, 4 in favour. Thank you very much. So, planning permission is granted on that basis. Thanks. And Councillor Spalding is coming back, and we now move to 54 Brompton Square, please. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify that we have 2 applications at 54 Brompton Square as it's grade 2 listed. So there'll be 2 votes, a planning permission and a listed building consent application. Starting with an aerial shot of the application site, marked there with the red blob. I've included this just to show you the context and the wider terrace. The thing to recognise in this scenario is the existing closet wings and then the glazed infills that you can see feature in all the properties. Some single storey, some such as the adjacent site at number 53 has a double storey glazed infill. Under the proposals, the existing single storey glazed extension would be demolished and replaced with a 2-storey glazed infill of a simpler design, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. The other part of the proposals relate to the lower ground floor. The photographs on screen now show the existing condition of the rear garden of the property. You can see that there's been some landscaping and there's a bricked area which has been raised up as part of the garden. Also note in the right-hand photograph there's an existing metal white staircase and platform that provides access down into the garden. So the proposal would introduce a lower ground floor extension in this garden area, which would be at the same level as this existing metal platform. If I show you in plan, so you can see on the left-hand image in the pinky colour, that's the extension out into the garden area. There would be a small light well left right at the rear at the boundary. And then the right-hand image shows you the new sort of raised garden area that would be created as a result of the infill extension. And again, just in sections, so with the existing above and the proposed below. I've mainly included this just to show the location of that double-storey infill, just to show it would still be set back from the edge of the closet wing. And then the lower ground floor extension You can see on the bottom right hand of the screen, and again to confirm that is at the same level as that metal platform. I thought it would be helpful just to include a couple of photographs from one of the objectors. This is the resident at number 53 who raised concerns about the potential loss of light if an extension was built out into the garden area of the application site. Just to confirm, the height of the extension would be well below this boundary area. So these are the photographs that he's provided, and you can see this white fence that forms part of this property. If I then flick to the next slide, this shows you the view of the application garden looking down. On the left-hand image, you can see there, just make out that white fence but from the objector's photograph. And as I say, just to confirm, the height of the extension would be sat well below the height of that boundary fence, so there would be no impact on the levels of daylight and sunlight enjoyed by the occupier of number 53. And those are all my slides, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that. Colleagues, any questions for Katie Hall? Councillor Bakhtiar.
Well, I had prepared a question, but Katie already answered it when you mentioned the light and the height of the... Thank you.
Yes, that concerned me too, but has been addressed. Thank you very much. Same for you, Councillor Regis. Councillor Ritchie, the same. Yeah. The only question I had then was just about the materials for the slightly more contemporary windows on the back of the building. They are timber, aren't they? The big windows.
In the infill extension?
Yes.
Yes, I believe so. Let me just check that is the case.
Oh yes, it does say new double height timber framed glazed infill extension. Yeah. Okay.
I believe on the listed building consent we ask for details and samples anyway, so we would have the security of making sure that all the materials used were appropriate through that condition.
Yes, that's actually a very good point, and good to know that it's going to be carefully checked by the Historic Buildings Officer, no doubt. Good. Well, colleagues, unless there are any further points, we need to vote on both proposals before us, both the Planning Permission and the listed building consent. And through the Planning Permission first, the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report. Could I please see those in favour of the recommendation? None con. And then listed building consent, recommended that the committee grants listed building consent subject to conditions set out in section 2. Can I see those in favour, please? Also unanimously in favour. Thank you very much indeed. So we move to number 5, Neville Street. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If it's all right, I was going to consider the applications at 5 Neville Street and 3 to 8 Fowlis Terrace under one very brief presentation for you. Again, the same scenario, that they are both listed properties, so there's a pair for consideration at both sites. The reason for a committee decision this evening on these applications is that we don't have the delegated authority on these types of applications where a land use swap is proposed. You'll have seen from the pack that there are no objections or representations of any kind being received from residents on these applications. I just also wanted to clarify, I've included on screen here a corrected site location plan for 5 Neville Street. The one in the pack is incorrect and actually shows the property at 5 Neville Terrace. But all the submission documents that were provided by the applicant were correct, but I just wanted to be entirely clear so we knew the exact property we were looking at this evening. And then I thought this aerial shot was helpful in showing the two properties. So the smaller arrow on the bottom of the image, that's 5 Neville Street, and then the Fowlis Terrace properties shown by the other arrow. I think that gives you an idea of how close these properties are and why officers have considered that a land use swap is appropriate given the proximity to the two sites. And then this final slide just hopefully provides a summary of what you've all read in the report about the proposals. So just to clarify, at the moment, at 5 Neville Street, the property is configured into 7 HMO units. Under the proposals, this would be converted to a 5-bedroom house. So to compensate for the loss of this accommodation, the HMO units, the basement of 3 to 8 Fowler's Terrace would be converted to create 8 HMO units. A 1-bedroom unit would also be provided, and a brand new office. The existing use of the building, the basement of 3 to 8 Fowler's Terrace, is that of a nursery. However, you're seeing from the report that this wasn't a nursery open to the general public. It was tied via condition to be used only by the staff of Brompton Hospital, and it hasn't been used in that way for a number of years due to changing shift patterns and change in demand. So the hospital now no longer have use for these properties on Fowler's Terrace. That's the presentation, and hopefully the report sets out why officers have concluded in this instance it's acceptable. Overall, as I say, we see it as a benefit in that we're getting 1 additional HMO unit, 1 new home, a new unit, and a new office unit, as well as on both sites there's some significant works inside both the listed buildings, some of which are deemed to be of benefit to the heritage significance of those buildings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. Councillor Idris.
Yes, I know there is 8 HMO units which compensate for the 7 units plus 1. What size are the 7 units, the existing units, and what size will these ones be? Are they the same size, cipher size, or much smaller, larger?
I wouldn't be able to give you direct figures, but they are largely comparable, or if not better, and certainly the quality of the accommodation is better, we would see, under the proposals than that at 5 Neville Terrace at the moment.
Councillor Spalding.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions. I realise that ownership is not a planning matter, but I understand both of these properties and the applicant is the Royal Brompton Hospital. And this is presumably all part of their business plan. Will the 8 HMO units be used for medical staff, for nurses, or will they be open to the public?
We've not proposed that we should in any way tie them in legally to be affiliated with the hospital. We're mindful that things might change, and so they would be open to anyone to live in that accommodation. I say our understanding is that the HMOs in that area and in the ownership of the Brompton Hospital haven't been used by hospital staff for many years. They say largely due to changes in shift patterns, and there's no longer the need for their staff to stay overnight and live nearby the hospital.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, under 6.8, this is the legal agreement that ties the land swap together. 6.8 rather conflicts with 7.1. 6.8 says the legal agreement would be signed prior to any grant of planning permission. So in other words, we ought to see it here this evening, signed. But 7.1 says the legal agreement would be secured prior to occupation of the property. So I just wonder which it is.
So I can clarify that. So this evening, if you're minded to grant the application, you are making a recommendation and then giving us the delegated authority back to ensure that that legal agreement is completed prior to us issuing a decision notice. So planning permission would not be granted until that legal agreement is in place. What 7.1 is referring to is just the actual clauses within the legal agreement and how we would ensure that what we need is delivered. So in this instance, we need to ensure that the HMOs are provided before Neville Street can be used as a independent single home.
Okay, that's clear. Yeah, thank you.
Very clear. Thank you very much.
The single home will go in the market and be sold, right? The 5-bedroom house.
I don't think we know, do we?
Again, I assume so, but I wouldn't want to guess what the hospital's overall intention is. This whole site is covered by the Brompton SPD and their wider plans for, their property portfolio. So,
Might be very comfortable accommodation for the chief executive or something, who knows. Anyway, shall we move to vote on the recommendation? And you heard Katie explaining that it's subject to the satisfactory completion of an undertaking or agreement to secure the matters in section 7 and with the conditions listed in section 10 of this report. Could I please see those in favour? Councillor Bakhtiar. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Because there are 4 separate applications, can we take all 4 sort of in turn as we did before?
Yeah, I was planning to.
That's what you're doing,
yeah,
is it?
Yeah, sorry.
This type of applications normally goes to the Plan Application Committee, don't they? Major Application Committee, yeah.
The planning committee?
Yes.
no, there's no particular reason for it to go to a majors or a planning committee. There's nothing particularly of a scale or public interest as the representations or lack of representations, I think, illustrate.
It's not categorised as a major application, is it? No.
It's not, no.
Okay, thanks. So if we go back to voting on the recommendation, first of all, for the Neville Street application, planning application, could I please see those in favour of the recommendation? All in favour? I beg your pardon. Sorry. 4 in favour, and Councillor Idris, are you you're opposing it? Okay. So 1 against. Then can we move to the list of building consent for 5 Neville Street? Could I please see those in favour? 4 in favour and against, yeah. And then to Friarless Terrace, the planning application. Could I please see those in favour of the recommendation there? 4 in favour, against. And the listed building consent. Recommended the committee grants planning permission with conditions listed in section 2 of the report. Can I please see those in favour? And Councillor Idris against. Okay, thank you very much. That's all noted. And I think that completes the South Pack, doesn't it? So we now move on to Sheldrake Place and Mr. Taylor. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Chairman. So this is an application to extend the existing house at 17 Sheldrake Place with rear extension and some side and roof extensions. The first slide I'm showing you there shows the existing rear elevations of the property. So note there at ground level that on the right-hand side of the image you can see where the shutter is. That was the originally proposed position for the rear extension, but the application was revised to move it to the other side of the property. The image that I'm showing you there is a 3D visual which has now been superseded, but we don't have a new version of that visual. I thought it was still useful just because it's a good indication of the scale of the extension. Just bear in mind that the extension is no longer in that position, but it's over at the left-hand side of the image, or the bottom corner of the property in that view. What you can see there, you'll see reference in the application to an oriel window, in other words, a projecting window. In that image, you can see the projecting window facing towards this side of the property in the rear extension. So if you just imagine that that's flicked round to face in the opposite direction, then that would be accurate. And again, in that image, that's the rear extension on the wrong side of the building. But again, it's just useful, I thought, to give you an impression as to what it would look like. And that's the proposed ground floor. So you can see there at the left-hand side of the image that the extension is now on the other side of the building. And you can see the oriel window in plan form, sort of pointing towards the bottom of the image. And then that's the existing rear elevation and the proposed rear elevation. So that shows the extension to the left-hand side. And you'll see there the new dormer for the rear roof, and also the remodelled side dormer. And then that's the existing front elevation. So you'll see that there's a blank space above the centremost windows in that elevation. And then the proposed front elevation shows dormer window then positioned above those. And then the existing side elevation, so you can see there that there's an existing dormer window inside facing roof slope. And then that's the proposed side elevation with the new dormer, so that dormer gets replaced by that dormer. And that's the last slide, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Questions to Derek? Councillor Bachelor.
I picked up a question from the objecting letters, stating that it's clear that the plan application does not follow the pre-application advice. Is that true, Mr. Taylor?
I mean, the planning application doesn't have to follow the pre-application advice. A planning application is always assessed on its own merits, whatever views or advice were given at pre-application stage. I don't actually have the pre-application letter here, so I couldn't tell you for certain whether there was anything in the pre-application advice that wasn't followed. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that it didn't follow the pre-application advice. I mean, that doesn't matter, that the planning application has to be reassessed or assessed completely on its own merits.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Spaulding.
If I could refer to this elevation, the side elevation, with the what's called the extension to the left. It's the rear elevation. That's the one.
Right, this one, yeah.
What immediately hits my eye about that is that these glazed glass panels, the material is aluminium. There are no glazing bars. I think the other windows, I'm not sure if they're metal crystal windows or if they're wooden glazing bars.
The other ones on the upper floors are timber framed.
They are timber.
Yeah.
You see, in the roof dormer, if you look at the note to the side, they make much of the fact that it matches neighbouring properties in terms of the glazing bars. Well, this is a bit crude. They're huge glass panels, there are no glazing bars, and they're made of aluminium. Now, all of that just seems to stick out like a sore thumb to me compared to the style of the rest of the building. I don't know if it's sufficiently harmful to refuse it, but it doesn't seem to be very sympathetic.
Well, I mean, I think that's obviously a matter for judgment for the planning authority or for the committee this evening. I think I'd make two comments. I mean, the first thing obviously is that it is important that the upper floor windows are consistent. It's not unusual to have an extension at lower level with modern architectural elements, such as the aluminium framing for the doors and the large glass panels. I mean, I think if they were proposing that at the upper floor, then I'm not sure that I'd be supporting the application. But at ground floor level, I think there's enough precedent, I don't mean precedent in the legal sense, but that there are enough examples around of sort of modern styled or modern architectural treatments for ground floor level extensions.
I completely get that people want to have a view through the big glass doors, bring the outdoors in. Can I just ask, if this was not a conservation area, that would be permitted development at the back anyway, a rear extension?
Yes, that there would be permitted development rights for a rear extension.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask about these dormers, whether we're satisfied that they look right relative to the rest of the street.
Well, the superseded image, if you look at the side dormer, which is the left-hand dormer in the superseded image, you can see that the neighbouring dormer over at the right-hand side has a type of neo-Georgian approach with its glazing. The originally proposed side dormer didn't have that. They'd actually gone for a more modern, larger glazed approach for it, which the officers looking at it decided that was inappropriate. And then the proposal eventually was revised to include a dormer at the side matching the others. So I think now the glazing for the dormers, they're all compatible with each other and also compatible with neighbouring properties.
Good. Thank you very much. Councillor Idris.
Can we either condition or have the material? I have a problem with people building in conservation area without conserving, without actually looking at the material and keeping the whole place in harmony. And this particular, it's too modern in a place where it doesn't fit. It might be, as Malcolm said, has it not been a conservation area, it would have been a permitted development, and they wouldn't need to come to us in the first place. But the reason they're here, it's because it's a conservation area, and we need to be very, very mindful about conserving in a conservation area. So I'm having an issue with the style of building. Yes, we cannot talk about style. Maybe we cannot tell people how to build, but it's not fitting with the area.
I'm not sure, Chairman, if that was a question, but I mean, in terms of just to comment on that, certainly, but my advice to the committee is that at the ground floor level, that the modern architectural treatment would not be harmful to the appearance of the building. And the key elements in the conservation area, in my view, would still be preserved. Obviously, you could come to a different view. I don't think a condition could remodel the rear extension. I think if the view of the committee was that the architectural approach for the rear extension was wrong and was harmful, then the correct decision would be to refuse planning permission. I mean, the doors are proposed with aluminium. You couldn't actually do framing like that in timber, so you'd have to start to rework the whole approach to the rear extension if you wanted timber at that level. But my advice would be that at that level it wouldn't be harmful, but obviously you have to come to your conclusion on that.
Yeah, thank you. And there is condition 3 that deals with work and work of making good shall be finished to match the existing exterior of the building in respect to materials, colour, texture, profile in the case of brickwork, face bond and pointing, and shall be so maintained. So that will give some comfort, hopefully, to Councillor Idris. Little, perhaps. So, unless there are any further comments or discussion required, I think we can vote on the recommendation, which is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of this report. Can I please see those in favour of the recommendation? And Councillor Idris, are you against or abstaining? You're abstaining this time. Okay, thank you very much. Well, 4 in favour, so planning permission is granted. Thank you. And
Can we have a break?
a break?
Yeah, please.
I didn't know Councillor Schmetterling was present. Do we... yes, well, if requested, I must consent to it. Can it be a quick break, please, Councillor Retty? About 3 minutes from it. Right, we'll make a start. Thank you very much. And next is Highlevel Road.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a fairly simple application to replace the existing timber windows with new timber windows. That's an image of the front of the property to give you its flavour, a typical Victorian house, but those are the existing elevations showing the windows at the front and the rear and the side, and then that's proposed. So essentially when the application was first submitted they were proposing UPVC, that they were considered unacceptable, so they revised it by just confirming that they would be in timber, and that's the proposal. So other than that I've got nothing to add to the report.
Thank you very much. I'm, for one, mightily relieved to hear that they've given up on UPVC for their proposal and that they're proposing now timber windows, because it's a very attractive house, as we saw from the photograph at the front, and be completely ruined by UPVC windows. So, colleagues, any questions to Mr. Taylor? It is quite straightforward, I think. Right, well, the recommendation is that we grant planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of the report. Can I please see those in favour? All in favour, gosh. So 5 in favour, thank you very much. And then next is the primary school in St Mark's Road.
Right, another fairly straightforward one, hopefully. This is brought to committee because it's the council's own development, that there were no objections to it. But just to illustrate it, that the first image shows the primary school at the centre of the image. If you look at the centre of the roof of the primary school, you can see that there's an elevated section in the roof. And that actually provides light down to the sort of central space where the main hall is within the primary school. In elevation terms, that's the existing elevation, and you can see outlined in red hatching what is to be removed. And then that's the proposed. So that's the existing, and then that's the proposed. The schoolhouse, as it's called, or the old caretaker's house, is to have new windows and doors, and then that shows you the parts of the caretaker's house that would be altered. And then that's the caretaker's house with the new windows fitted. That's the last slide, Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions, Mr. Taylor? Councillor Spalding, sorry.
I didn't quite catch it. Why has it come to committee?
Because the council's scheme of delegation doesn't specify that council's own applications can be dealt with by the Director of Planning. So, I mean, for many years you may not have seen them, and that's because the scheme of delegation simply doesn't state what should be done with them. So then I think we're just being a bit careful at the moment, as there's no explicit power to do them under delegated authority, but we're bringing them to committee for that reason.
And I believe the windows here are going to be metal powder coated, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Which is acceptable for that building.
Yeah, and it strikes me it's an improvement on the existing building. So, colleagues, any further points? Otherwise, we'll move to a vote on that. No. So the recommendation is that the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 9 of the report. Please see those in favour. All in favour. Thank you very much. So planning permission is granted, and we move to 79 Camden Street.
Right, so this application for 79 Camden Street proposes a single-storey extension into the existing rear courtyard, retaining a light well in part of that area. The first two photographs are obviously taken from the courtyard looking back towards the house. Where the open doors are to the left-hand side, that would be where the retained light well area would be. And then the right-hand side shows an existing extension that would effectively be extended back into the courtyard area. That's a section through the existing property on the right-hand side, with the existing rear elevation to the left-hand side. And then that's the proposed rear elevation on the left, and then a section through the property on the right-hand side. That section shows the retained light well with the proposed extension behind it. But on the other side, you could do another section that would show the extension all the way through without the light well. But that's the section through the light well. In plan form, on the left-hand side, that's the internal plan of the extension. So you can see there that there's a bedroom and a bathroom within it. And then there are sort of concertina doors that would open into the light well. That's the proposed open courtyard, annotated on the right. The roof image on the right-hand side simply shows a flat roof with the courtyard in the bottom right corner of that. And then finally, those are just useful images to show that the neighbours have done something very similar. There are a number of infills of the courtyards along here. The neighbours one is different because they've actually got a glazed lantern light above the courtyard area. But in our case, at number 79, they've actually sort of retained the courtyard as an open area. That's all. And that's the last slide, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, any questions on this? I have a question, if I may. One of the objectors, Mr. Manton, refers to trees being removed. Can I just clarify that we don't think there are any trees going to be removed?
There are no trees in the courtyard, no.
No.
I mean, they have, there's creepers and planting, but there are no trees.
Some shrubs, possibly. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Well, one of the objectors asking a question about something which relates to previously explained to building control after application, structural engineer's report and how to deal with the chimney, how to remove it. Just to clarify for them that this is dealt with a different department. Am I correct on that?
Sorry, I didn't catch the last three words you said.
Structural engineer's report. This is to do with the building control. They will be managing this after the plan permission was granted. Yes,
I mean, after a planning permission is granted, if that is your decision, I mean, there would then be two things that would need to happen. One would be that any passy wall awards that were necessary would have to be completed with the neighbours. Almost certainly the structural work here would have some bearing on the Passy Wall. So I would think the Passy Wall Act of 1996 would kick in. Then the second thing that would need to happen would be they'd need to get approval under the building regulations. And obviously the building regulations approval would have to chime with the Passy Wall drawings. Yes. So there'd be a bit of discussion that would take place at that point. So all the structural discussion would take place under those two pieces of legislation.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Well, unless there are any further comments or discussion required, let's vote on the recommendation, which is, imagine, to grant planning permission with conditions listed in section 9 of this report. I see those in favour, please. All in favour? Thank you very much. So we move to, I believe, the last item, Logan Place. Thank you.
Right, thank you. This is a fairly complicated one for me to explain, so that the presentation's a little bit longer than the last few for this pack. But I think that's just necessary because there are two buildings effectively. One is number 3 Logan Place and the other is the block of 4 to 8 Logan Place. And it'll just take a few slides to give you the full picture as to what's happening. I mean, in short, a basement is being proposed throughout the entire site, and then both blocks would have an additional storey added or strictly speaking, a roof extension to 4 to 8, and then a full additional story to number 3. These are the front elevations to Logan Place. So you can see there the existing building of 4 to 8. Number 3 is hidden behind these. The elevations of 4 to 8 doesn't really change, but I thought that's just useful to give you the impression of the building from the front. Behind at the moment, you're looking there at the rear elevation of 4 to 8 at the back of that slide. And then you'll see that there's a light well separating that from number 3, which is in the foreground. For maintenance purposes, you can see what looks like a curvy railway track running around the existing flat roof, and that's the position where the roof extension to number 3 would go. And then, sorry, beg your pardon. That's a view taken from bedroom 4 in 6 Logan Place, looking across at that flat roof that you've just seen. So you can see there the flat roof with the sort of tram lines on it, and you can see there the side of the tram line, which is the view that you can see from the windows in the previous photograph. So that's all of those. I think those photographs are very helpful. They're submitted with the objections, and you've got all those photographs in the pack. And then that's looking down into the light well, so the glazing you see at the top level there, you can just about see at the left-hand side of that photograph looking down into the light well. It's proposed to infill the light well at the lower level and then keep it free at the upper levels. And that's taken from the bottom of the light well looking up towards the existing north elevation to number 3. These two images that are taken from the sun and daylight study, they're just, I think, very useful just to give you the overview. So that's the existing building in the sort of brown colour, and then the proposed additions you can see there in the blue. So you can see on the right-hand side the roof extension to numbers 4 and 8, 428, and then the additional story slots in on top of number 3 at the left-hand side of the image. That's the existing section, and if you look at the bottom of that, you'll see where the proposed basement level slots in. So that's the existing, and then that's the proposed basement running right the way across between 4 to 8 and number 3. If I can refer you also in that image to the sort of top centre of the image, you can see the additional story to number 3. You'll see that the additional story is raked back quite noticeably on the inside, or on the right-hand side of the section. You'll have noted from the history that a previous version of this was actually refused because of the daylight impact that it would have on the existing flats of 4 to 8. To reduce the impact, the applicants have raked it back, as you see there. Even doing that, it's been a close call in terms of daylight, and there would still be a material daylight impact. But raking it back like that has reduced it to form the recommendation, which is before you, that in this form it would be tolerable. But that's the roof form necessary to achieve that. That's the proposed basement plan, showing it set out as essentially meeting rooms for the office building above it, together with cycle storage. And then that's the proposed third floor plan, showing the office level on the left with a roof terrace on the other side, not facing 4 to 8 Logan Place, but on the other side. And that's the existing section and north elevation to number 3. In other words, that's facing into the internal courtyard. And then that's the proposed elevation. So that's the existing version and the proposed. And then that's the existing rear elevation to number 3 and the proposed elevation at the rear of number 3. And then that's the coloured up version and the artist's impression of that. And then finally, that's another sketch showing the roof extensions, numbers 4 and 8. And then the front elevation doesn't change much apart from the roof lights you see at the top there. And that's the last slide.
Thank you very much. May I ask a question, and that is, what is the light reduction in percentage terms, do you know, to the flats in 4 to 8?
In percentage terms, the overall picture in percentage terms is compliance, but I say that the word overall is quite an important point. In the worst case is one window, which is to room 1 at ground floor level. Now that actually has 3 windows, but one of the 3 would lose 59%. Now you'll be familiar with the 20% vertical sky component yardstick. That yardstick means that above 20% a loss becomes noticeable. And I think the word noticeable immediately translates to materials. So when you hear of a material loss of light, above 20%, that becomes material. To have a material loss or a noticeable loss to one window is not in itself a reason for refusal. That the other 2 of the 3 windows here would all be BRE compliant. So the 3 windows together, basically we've concluded would not justify a refusal of planning permission. But the 59% to one window is definitely a significant loss to that window.
Where are you reading the 59% from, incidentally? Was it in the report?
The report doesn't actually specify that. I mean, that's in the Sun and Daylight study.
Oh, I see.
The Sun and Daylight study specifies every window in the building and gives the percentages for it.
But was that in our pack? Sorry, did I miss that? Or not? Was that in our pack, the Daylight study? Or
Not the full study.
Oh, okay, sorry. I thought you were reading from the pack.
I mean,
it looked as though you were.
I actually have it here in a hard copy, but it's sort of 60 sides.
No, don't worry.
It's not
Just,
actually
I thought I'd
included
missed it.
in the reports.
Okay.
But that's the worst case scenario. Everything else is much better than that.
Thank you.
I think the summary of it would be that I think 95% of the windows are all daylight compliant. But some of them aren't, but where they aren't, they're not exclusive to a room. There are other windows, such as in that example.
Well, colleagues, questions and views? Councillor Bakhtiar was first.
Thank you. A question from the objector saying that the plans submitted for this application are incorrect. There is a window shown on the existing plan on the 2nd floor of the eastern elevation of 6 Logan plan, as noted in figure 1. There is a figure in here. It looks like a skylight in here. Is that true? And there is a suggestion at the end saying, if we are minded to grant this application, they are asking for 2 conditions. Conditions should be included to ensure that the staircase windows are permanently obscure, glazed, and non-openable. And the second point is, prior to determination, the windows on the 2nd floor of the eastern elevation of 6 Logan plan should be removed from both existing and proposed plans for accuracy and to maintain privacy.
Well, the rear elevation to number 3 shows the windows that would be obscured. And essentially on this image,
I was reading this from Ferrer & Co., page 3 of 6, and the recommendation is 6 of 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the obscured windows are all indicated on the drawings. I mean, it would be possible to add a condition to the effect that those windows should be obscured and fixed shut. I mean, that they are obscured on the drawings. So I'm not sure if that would be strictly necessary, but yes, it would be possible to add such a condition, as the objector is suggesting, if you consider that was necessary.
Colleagues, what do you think of Councillor Bactiar's suggestion?
It's, yeah, if you read page 6 of Ferrer and Co., and they're asking if we are minded to grant it, asking for conditions, two conditions. The staircase, that the staircase windows are permanently obscure, glazed, and non-openable. And the second point, prior to the termination, the window on the second floor of the eastern elevation should be removed from both existing and proposed plans for accuracy and to maintain privacy. Sorry? Well, they're asking for privacy. But just
These are the windows to the offices that they're talking about. So there would be no reason why they would have to be opening windows. I mean, the building would have air conditioning. So it would be possible to add a condition to ensure they would be fixed shut. I mean, I think, yes, it would be possible walking down the staircase if the window was openable. There would be views across. So I think such a condition could be added. The drawings don't specify which windows would be fixed shut or not. The drawings just specify obscured glazing. So that the objector has a point in that to make them fixed shut, that would require a condition.
And the window on the second floor of the eastern elevation of 6 Logan Place. Which one's that, sorry?
I'm not sure what window that is.
Chairman, sorry, through you, there's, in paragraph 4.4, it does say that a window was removed. It talks about the following revisions were made in response to resident comments. I don't know if that has any relevance. There's also condition 8, which does talk about obscure glazing, and I don't know if that's...
Well spotted, I beg your pardon.
Thank you very much.
So that window was removed in the revision. Yeah.
Sorry, Derek.
And so we've got obscure glazing already, and Councillor Bactiar's proposal is... Yeah,
It's already there.
Councillor Bactiar's proposal is that they should also be non-openable, which we could
Councillor
add.
Bactiar comments.
Councillor Idris first, and then Councillor Areti.
Two questions. I thought I'm loud enough. The new studio flat, what size is it? Is it, I mean, I'm assuming it's within the habitable and
Yes, it is.
meets the minimum of,
It's a good sized flat. I think the floor space is 51 square metres,
okay.
which is
And,
that complies with London Plan standards. It's a
okay.
good sized flat.
all right. And condition 20, where it says the premises will never be does this condition trump what is existing now, where people can, I think it's a Class E, where people can just move about, change the use willy-nilly?
Well,
Am I making sense?
I mean, essentially, the government have obviously included or grouped together a wide range of uses within Class E.
Yeah.
So it's down to the planning authority to decide if there's any particular reason that something needs to be restricted within Class E.
So our restriction, will this actually trump what the central government propose?
Yes, to a point. And the reasoning is that there is already a relationship between the office building and the residential building. That relationship obviously is established and would continue. But there would be other uses within Class E that could alter that relationship significantly. So as an office, it's considered that it's fine. But other things within Class E might be very different.
And that's what, I think that's what a lot of residents are concerned about, that it might be able to use for other things. And that's why I'm saying condition 20 trumps anything else.
Yes. Condition 20 basically means that it has to be an office, nothing else within Class C.
And Councillor Retty, I think you had a question.
Thank you, Chairman. In terms of condition 20, so would that have a different number, or at least a classification of, like, I don't know, maybe 4A, 4B, or 8C, or is it just with that studio flat being in the same premises?
I don't know what number it would have, but I mean,
No, but
they would allocate it, presumably an A, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, the street naming and numbering process is separate to the planning
it's a
application
separate
process.
one. Right, okay.
I mean, they could call it ground floor studio, or
Thank you.
maybe 1A, who knows?
Well, shall we move to a vote? Sorry, Councillor Spalding.
It's a trivial point, but just for the record, we say this has got 7 objectors, but the first 2 objectors, I think, have crept in by default. The first objector seems to be Stafford Terrace, and not relevant to this application. He says this proposal is a serious infringement of my privacy, and he lives at Stafford Terrace in West 8. So it's a bit of a stretch of the imagination. And the second one relates to Portland Road. So I think they've just sort of crept in by, maybe the computer cut and pasted them itself.
I'm not sure. I think these are actually relevant.
Yep.
I think these are essentially owners of the flats, and they've rented their flats out.
Well, it does say the bedrooms at the rear in Portland Road will be overlooked by the additional floor, while Portland Road is about 3 miles away from this building.
That does, except the wording in, if you're looking at Michael Weldon, I mean, the wording in the first of his points is talking about a large commercial building behind a residential block, which would be completely apt to this application.
And there's also a Nicholas Weldon, who may be related. So possibly Portland Road is a typo.
Yeah.
It's a put-up job.
Anyway, I just
I mean, for the sake of your decision, I'd assume that they were all relevant to this case rather than discount any of them.
All right. Well, thank you very much for raising that. Now, I suggest we might wish to add Councillor Bakhtiar's sensible suggestion that the windows on the staircase be made non-openable in addition to being obscured. Do other colleagues support that
Chairman, I
idea?
think condition 8 already says that.
Does it? Oh, beg your pardon. Sorry. I thought it did not say non-openable, but I didn't study it.
Let's just check.
It does say fixed shut.
Oh, it does say fixed shut. Okay.
Same thing. Beg your pardon.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
it actually has both in the condition.
Fine. In which case, should we vote on the recommendation as it is before us? And the recommendation is the committee grants planning permission with the conditions listed in section 10. And there's also a section 106 agreement to be organised by the planning department. So can I see those in favour of the recommendation, please? All in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Well, permission's granted subject to that section 106. Thank you all very much. That concludes this evening's business.